This is Product Innovation Show with your guest host, Sergey Ross. I'm here with Idoh Gersten, who is a product manager of privacy and security at Circle CI. It's a software delivery engine for teams who want to ship software faster and with more confidence. Idoh, pleasure to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Awesome to be here.
What are you excited for about right now? Could be personal, professional. What's going on in your life that is cool?
Yeah, what am I excited about? I'm training for a big bike ride in July. It's called the Death Ride. It's
Really?
Yeah, so it's a 100-miler, but it has a lot of elevation gain, 15,000 feet of elevation gain, and it takes place up in the California Sierra Mountains. And so this is going to be my fourth time attempting it. So fourth time's the charm.
Wow. So that's like a road bike or mountain bike.
Yeah. It's a road bike. It's all on the roads, but it's in the mountains. Yeah. So yeah, first time I failed.
Yeah.
And then second time was canceled for COVID. Third time there was a fire, and then this is the fourth time.
Well, fourth time it is. Well, is it one day or it's like a stage?
Not a stage. It's one day. And so I think that you start at 5:30 in the morning and then you just bike. And they have aid stations, but you just bike, and there's checkpoints. And if you don't hit the checkpoints at certain times, then they stop you. But you could be biking from 5:30 in the morning till 7 at night. So I'm hoping to get it done in 10 to 12 hours. So I'm training for that.
Long day in the office.
Yeah, but I'm training. I'm really well trained. I'm gonna try to make it look easy. Just a nice jaunt in the mountains on a bike.
I love biking. I'm more into cross country mountain biking, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for everybody who does road, because road is so much harder in many ways. Like the resilience that you need to have to keep doing it for many hours, and also elevation, and it's stiff on the bike for that long.
Yeah. So I think mountain biking is harder because you fall off the bike more, and there's just more chance to get injured. Yeah.
It's shorter though for a race. Like if you do a cross country race, it's 30, 40. Well, sometimes it's 50 kilometers, but the race is shorter because your concentration is so high to not get yourself killed.
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. All right. Yeah. But anyway,
let's go back. Let's go back to product. As we wanted to discuss it in the first place. Now, I want to talk about biases, decision-making biases. We spent some time talking with you a little bit about it the last time. When we look at those biases in product, what are some of the ones that come to mind immediately for you?
Yeah, first, we did talk about bias, and it's interesting. I think that everyone is kind of trained when you hear the word bias to sort of be like, I don't want to have any bias, right? But I think that bias against people is really bad, but having a sort of product bias, maybe it's bad, but maybe it's kind of product sense at the same time, or its style. So I don't know. I'm not sure if bias is necessarily bad. I think that holding on to bias, that's for sure kind of a bad thing. But I guess for me, what my product biases are.
And you researched, you just were showing me the book before we start rolling. Was there something that was there something that surfaced up for you recently about the bias, or just even the way that you think about it?
Yeah, so I think it comes up all the time. I'm working on a feature now, and we have some very real trade-offs that have to be made around do we want to go to the market quickly and get feedback, or do we want to sort of ship a more fully fleshed out version? I think that there's there's always a trade-off, right? Like, do you just get it to barely work and get that out, even though you know that there's flaws? Or do you build it out and then delight the customer? Do you what's the approach going to be? Personally, I like to I bias more towards getting it to work in some fashion, just barely, and then getting out to customers, because I feel like there's some unpredictability, right? That you don't really know how people are going to react to it. But I think that it's tough. Like in the SaaS space where I'm operating at, sometimes you have customers that are paying a lot of money to use your product, and you don't really want to release something which is rough, right? Like, it definitely has to work. It has to not have bugs in it. But even if it's rough, then they could be disappointed. Like, why are we spending $1 million a year and then you're releasing this crap? They might say, yeah.
Unless you manage the expectation, saying, "Listen, this is very, very early. We are doing this super early pilot, and just expect some turbulence."
Yeah. So I think that part of it is picking out the right partners for a beta test, or however you want to do it. But then also part of it is making sure that the whole team is aligned around, hey, if things are found, then you have to quickly fix it. The whole agile process. So everything has to kind of be lined up that way, and then it can work out. But even internally, I'm having discussions now, and that I get a lot of pressure around, hey, you really need to make sure that this thing is a very polished experience. Needs to be an 11-star experience, right? And all of that makes sense, but it's kind of trade-offs. And I think that maybe one way of thinking about biases is just what trade-offs you're making, or where on the trade-off spectrum you just kind of land for some dimension.
But then they have the deadline, right? They want this to be done in that amount of time, which of course is not enough most of the time for that 11th star.
Yeah, that's the issue. There's always timelines. You need to get things out as fast as possible, or show progress, that type of stuff. So yeah, just kind of like navigating your way through that. Yeah, it's always difficult. I don't know. The way that I try to navigate it is, I feel like there's just a huge amount of uncertainty around plans, and I think that having a very high level vision makes a lot of sense, but having an extremely detailed plan that stretches out for, let's say, 6 months, like, first I'm going to work on this, and then I'm going to work on this. Once things get in the real world, in the hands of customers, plans always change. Like Mike Tyson says, everybody's
I was going to say
plan. Yeah, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
It says right there.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's funny.
It's so true. But also, Idoh, in terms of like making that decision on, well, do I release something that is far from being polished versus a little bit more polished? This is also part of a company style, or part of the philosophy within the company, of what they're comfortable with putting out of the door, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's that also. I think working with designers is something that it honestly hasn't come naturally for me. Working with designers and making sure that the relationship is really good. I think I'm a lot better at it now, but I'm actually more willing to let the designers just go ahead and design, and not let my particular UI sensibilities kind of take control.
Get in the way.
My UI sensibilities. I really like Craigslist. I think that Craigslist is like the best website. And so probably if I was designing everything, everything would just look like Craigslist, like hyper functional, really fast, but just text, and that's it. And so, yeah, I've had to sort of learn to recognize that, and I don't know why, but most people don't like Craigslist type web apps.
Yeah, they're more like an old school type of. It's like an old Amazon website that I personally loved, in a way that there's not much eye candy or hardly any type of
Right.
elements. It's just like hardcore, bam, 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 fast.
And everything's fast. Yeah, you click on things, everything's really fast. And that's the way I like it. But yeah, like that's my bias, right? Circling back to bias. But yeah, like each company, they have their design library, right? And then they have designers who they're hired because they can do a better job of UX and UI than what I can do. And it's been like, I've had to learn that my job, like when there's designers on the team, my job isn't to actually do any of the design. It's to gather the requirements, understand the contours of what's possible with the solution, and then relay that over to the designers and work with them to make sure that what they're building is technically possible and meets the pain points, the use cases, that type of stuff.
But
Which
it's
is
difficult though, right? Like it's difficult though when you have a certain design language perspective or preference, like at Apple, skeuomorphic design. Scott Forstall's team, including Steve Jobs, was fighting hard until, unfortunately, until obviously Steve passed away in 2011, and then Johnny with their flat look won. And it's hard to, when designers come with completely different version of, it's a design philosophy, not necessarily single elements, or that could be a case too. And then it's like, oh, that's probably quite far off what you wanted.
yeah, I mean, I think that having there's kind of like a pod structure. Like a lot of times there's like the product manager, the designer, data analyst, engineers. So within a pod, I think that having really good relationship with your designer is super important. And if you're able to have a good relationship, then everything can flow really well. And maybe you want skeuomorphic, and then they come up with flat or something like that, and you can kind of navigate that. But if you're working with a designer, I wouldn't say a bad designer, but a designer that you don't really get along with, it's like being in a bad marriage. And
Totally.
it could, yeah, I've had that experience too. And it really messes up projects in like a terrible way if the PM, the designer, are not kind of on the same page with things. And that's definitely happened, right? Sometimes I'll be like, okay, can I just wireframe this, and then you just make the mock-up, and because we have to move on. But that actually, designers really hate that.
But it's, I agree with you. I as a marketer, I worked with designers who are super easy to get along with, the ones, and then the ones that are really difficult. And I would say, like you said, when you are getting along with a person, it is so much easier because then you are working together. You could come up with something. They're like, "Oh, I love this idea. Let me take that concept or something really
Yeah.
rough that you came up with and work on it." Or they came up with something, and you're like, "Listen, this doesn't work." They're so okay to scrap the whole thing and do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Versus with a different designer, they might be great, but it's always a fight. There's always a subtle fight or more
Yeah.
obvious fight, and it's just like that. It's just a different philosophy or different values that you have, but then it completely stalls the whole effort.
Yeah, for sure. And for some reason, I think that uh, for me anyway, it can be a little bit harder to navigate that PM designer relationship than, let's say, the PM engineer relationship, because there's just more vagueness or ambiguity. Like there's less logic, I guess, with design, and it's just more a matter of style. And yeah, I don't know, is interesting. But yeah, like I've had to learn to
Yeah.
let go, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. That's something that let these guys come up with it. I think over time, you just uh, find ways to pick fights that make sense versus the ones that
Right.
just go ahead and if you want this, then do whatever you want, and we'll work on something else.
Yeah, as long as it's reasonable, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. What do you, if you were to pick one of the worst features or most difficult features you had to work on? What are the ones that come to mind just throughout the whole career as a product manager?
Yeah, the worst features.
I
Yeah,
think
I think
when we spoke the first time, I think you mentioned it was a horoscope app, wasn't it?
that was that was kind of the best. That was my favorite. Yeah. Astrology was really good. Because it was so simple and I got to spend a lot of time. A lot of times there's just a very busy roadmap where you have to do feature to make the stakeholders happy, and you never get a chance to go back and iterate. And with the horoscopes app, uh, which is probably my most successful app I ever worked on. Um, it was just three screens,
Mm.
and I got to spend a lot of time actually iterating on those screens and making the whole experience really smooth. I think that we spent 6 months or 9 months just on three screens, doing testing and that type of stuff. And it was really nice to get to that really polished experience. I think the worst the worst products or features that I've had to work on. I'm actually working on something right now, which I find extremely challenging.
Mm.
I do a little bit of consulting, and in the project that I'm doing now, there's a lot of stakeholders. Okay, so there's a lot of stakeholders, and
Yeah.
there's there's a there's not one particular process that the business has. Like every single person has a different process that they use to go through a workflow, and they manage it on spreadsheets. So you ask different people, like, how do you achieve the result that you want? And then they're like, well, I go to the spreadsheet and there's 12,000 items on it, and I do this and this, and they're very opinionated about it. And then you talk to the next person, and then they're extremely opinionated, but they achieve results in a completely different way. Um, so that's really challenging. And then the mock-ups were done before any requirements gathering, and
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
yeah, so there's a bunch of mock-ups, and like I kind of got brought in as like, okay, we have the mock-ups, and go ahead and make the PRD, and let's, the engineers are waiting. Let's go. Let's get this done. And like, yeah, I found that really challenging because it's like I have to look at the mock-ups and kind of infer what the intent of it was. But then when I talk to the stakeholders, they all have different ideas as to what the thing is supposed to do. So I think that has happened before also, and I find that
How
to be
did
really
you,
challenging.
how do you find these guys approach customers? Like when you walked into it, like how much customer data, customer information you have to say to even be able to help?
Yeah, that's really the problem, that I don't think that they did the appropriate level of discovery. And you have to spend time with the customers to really understand what their pain points or problems are, right? Um, so you have to spend time, but that's a necessary but not sufficient. And then you have to synthesize that feedback. And I think that synthesizing the feedback is also really important. Uh, for these particular customers, there is no one true workflow. And so like everyone has a complicated workflow. And so what you kind of need to build is something which is powerful, lets you set statuses and pull things up according to those statuses, but doesn't have sort of a locked down workflow, right? And I think that first of all, they didn't really lay that foundation of talking to customers, and then second, they didn't what they had, they didn't synthesize into actually understanding that everyone's workflow is different in this situation. So,
but you got to prioritize to some people. Otherwise, you're going to be building something between Zapier and Excel. And that's going to be really difficult. Like it's going to be a Frankenstein
yeah,
build.
right. I mean, that's the challenge, right? Where I have to try to find a way of walking that balance of I can't just ship a web version of Excel, right? That's not going to work. And that'll be a failure. But then I can't sort of ship like a locked down. What I'm figuring out now is just what parts of the flow are common and across everybody. Like there's kind of fundamentally it's about approving and rejecting certain classes of items, and that's common, right? You kind of want to drive this list of things to either being approved or rejected, and so that's the core of the workflow. But then how you actually get there, then that varies from person to person. And so figuring out which parts are common, which parts vary, I think that's the trick of it.
But do you prioritize? Like, do you actually look at the workflows and say, listen, let's just focus on these 5 or these 3 and get those to a certain level, or not?
Yeah, 100%. So the the client, they wanted everything all at once.
Well, that's what that was my impression.
Yeah, and so I was like, it's just not really possible to deliver everything all at once. That what we should do is we should break this project into phases, and then decide what's the most important things to deliver in the first phase. Which for me, it's usually something around some type of end-to-end flow where it just barely works. You can get the job done from start to finish. Yeah. And so I was able to get them on board with that. And so that's kind of the first piece that we're working on, is just get this to barely work, and then let's get this in front of customers. And it probably represents 20% of the planned work is this kind of MVP, or this little chunk. And I fully expect that once we get that MVP in front of customers, that they're going to take it in completely different directions than what's sort of been planned out. And that's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, so true. What do you feel like a lot of times companies, product managers skip in their product development workflow? We talked about one thing, which is a very glaring omission with this client, but in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a good question. What do they skip?
Or maybe don't spend enough time on.
I think I would say either let's see, user feedback, iteration, or looking at the numbers. Like, it's my understanding that at really at some of those big FANG type companies, like Facebook or Google, they're really all about the numbers. The places that I've worked at, the B2B SaaS companies, they've tended to be a little bit more sales focused, and then they're not necessarily they're not really looking at the usage stats. That a lot of their business is making sure that they have features in place to win a deal, and then once the deal's won, then it's the CSM's, customer success manager's, responsibility to keep the customer happy. And then because
they look at the RFPs, right? Aren't they competing on RFPs mostly?
Yeah, yeah.
which is a
And
different beast altogether.
it's a different beast, yeah. But then usage can be kind of low, and everyone gets frustrated because usage is low. But then the PMs are kind of incentivized, like, hey, well, for this next batch of things, we're competing with these guys, and we need to have certain features in place. And I understand why that happens, and I've been in that situation too. Uh, but I think that fundamentally the business is not going to be well served if you're putting out features and you're winning RFPs, but then the usage is really low on them. And so I think that the thing that I've seen that's been missing is just going back to things that you've already done and seeing how well they're actually working out in practice, and then fixing them. Which, but it's sometimes it's really hard to do. That you
Yeah,
just don't get, yeah, you don't get the space for it.
time, space, like stakeholders, other projects, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's other projects, and technically or theoretically, you have that feature out there, and it's sort of checking the box on the RFPs and the sales. They can sell again. They can sell it, right? Um, and then the fact that it doesn't actually work that well is kind of a secondary concern. But I guess that would be the advice that I would give to like the directors and VPs of product, that uh, it's not a good long-term strategy, that eventually it'll fail.
Yeah, at some point you're going to have so many products, little products, that you it's a it's a debt, right? That goes into the future.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not like tech debt. It's kind of maybe it's retention debt, and
Mm.
and then you'll find that customers, maybe after a couple years with the product, then they'll churn, and they'll churn because of something like, well, we got this product and then we looked at our stats and it turns out that no one really used it, and so then no one really loved it, and when it came time to renew, there's just no one fighting for it, or something like that, right? um, and by the time you get to that point, it's really hard to fix retention problems. Like
Because
I feel
these
like,
guys these guys are betting on a relationship with when they're selling, right? When they're selling to an account, they're betting on a relationship
yeah,
with a few people. That's really how it works. And then the actual end user, well, they'll just quote unquote suck it up for another year, and then we'll see what happens.
yeah, yeah. And I remember I was working at a company, it's a B2B SaaS company, and I think that there was a team of 5 product managers there, and I really wanted to talk to an end user, and it was extremely difficult to even talk to any end users. And I think I had to do a lot of negotiations. And I remember I I got the opportunity to actually talk to an end user once. It was something like I had to call this person, and I left a voicemail message. And I remember I was interviewing like a PM candidate, and just before the interview with the PM candidate, this end user like called me, and I had to make a snap assessment of like, would I rather talk to the end user or interview this candidate? And I was like, I'm going to talk to the end user, because it's way harder for me to talk to the users than to talk to a PM candidate. And so I had to take that call. Um, but I think in the whole history of the company, I was the first and only PM who ever talked to any end users, and I just did it once. Uh, yeah, which is kind of crazy, right?
It is pretty insane. Was it? Did you find anything? Like, was it insightful? Anything you were able to extract?
Yeah, it was it was really it was really really interesting. Um, the the use, like this person's use of the product was completely different than what we imagined, right? We thought that the the so I'm trying to. It was really interesting. I'm trying to find a way to talk about it without giving away who the particular client was, but
Yeah.
um, like the goal of the product was around kind of sharing news in sort of a social way, and this particular customer, this client, what she was doing, and her name was Jerry. She was actually sharing scheduling information for her team using the app. And kind of what she had to do is like there was like a whiteboard, and she would write the schedule on the whiteboard and take a picture of it and share it in the app and distribute the information that way. Because of labor rules, she didn't and couldn't have the email address or phone numbers of the people that worked for her. And so if the schedule changed, she had no way to get that information out. Prior to using our product to get the information out, she was actually posting the information onto Facebook groups. And this is a multi-billion-dollar business. And then their management, like their middle managers, would post schedules onto Facebook, like each site. Yeah. So like you'd have like a site in like Reno, Nevada, and then the manager would like take a picture of a whiteboard and post it onto like the Facebook group that corresponded to that site. And so then instead she was using this product, and so that's what she used it for. And then the people who worked for her, they really liked it because they were hourly employees, and they liked the ability. They were hourly, and they were always like clocking in and clocking out. And there was something where if the schedule changed and they had to show up at 3:30 in the morning instead of 4:30, sometimes there would be billing errors. And then they liked that they could actually, like on the app, show what the schedule really was. Anyway, it was really wild, right? But the point is, like, what they were using the app for was completely different than what we thought people were using it for. Like a completely different use case entirely.
Yeah, it happens so often, especially with these dinosaur or these massive companies where different divisions don't talk to each other, and then you have all the compliance difficulties that come into into play.
Dinosaur is really crazy. Like I have been, and I'm still really surprised by these really large companies, like Fortune 500 companies or Fortune 100 companies, and they have trouble telling you things like, how many employees do you have? And they don't really know because they have 10 different HR systems, and it has to, like, there's a team of people, and then their job is to run reports on legacy databases and get a CSV. And that's how they transmit information, is they'll give you a giant CSV.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's unreal. Yeah. It's unreal how old school their ways of doing things are. It's unreal, absolutely. Idoh, let's finish off. Let's finish off with a quick fireside question round. Just one sentence, one word, or two sentences, just whatever comes to mind. And if nothing, then we'll just move on to the next question. Just a few. What product should people start doing tomorrow? What product people should be doing tomorrow to ship better work?
Yeah, talk to your customers, and then your customers' users, if applicable.
What aspects of product development money can't fix?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I guess quality. Yeah, can't fix that.
Would you at any point ask users what they want you to build? And when would you not do that?
Yeah, I mean, by the book, you're not supposed to ask that. You're supposed to ask, what are your pain points and challenges? I think that if someone but would I ever just ask that? Yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine situations like if they were just paying me a lot of money, they're if they were paying me a lot of money and then they were being really vague or frustrating, then I would just be like, hey, just tell me what you want to build.
At what point can you throw money at a product problem?
What point can you throw money at a product problem? I don't know. I don't know if you really can or if it's really a good idea. That if we're talking about a product problem, that means that there's some aspect of discovery, right? And to me, I think throwing money at something means that you sort of already made that discovery, and then you're trying to scale, right?
Scale.
Like you could
Yeah.
scale, yeah, right. You could scale a sales org, or you could scale marketing. Maybe I think you probably know more about marketing than I do, right?
Yeah.
Like once you have that resonant, once you sort of achieve like product market fit, then you can really scale things. Before you've achieved that, I don't know if you can really throw money and make it go faster.
Probably can't for the VCs, but don't do it.
Yeah, I guess if you wanted to, this is supposed to be rapid fire, but I can't help it. If you wanted to throw money
Yes.
at it, probably you'd have separate teams all focusing on the same problem. That might be a way of scaling it. So that way you have like twice the chance of getting product market fit.
What do you believe that other people think is insane?
What do I believe that other people think is insane? Like on a personal level or
Could be
anything?
personal. Could be personal. Yeah. Maybe it's just easier.
Um, it is kind of wild, but I think that there's like some universal consciousness, and that we all, like, our brains are kind of like radios and we kind of tap into it, which I think that's kind of wild, right? It doesn't make any sense logically, but that's something that I believe.
Well, we could unpack that. We could unpack that in the next episode, because this is I think personally quite a profound thought. Advice to a 30-year-old self.
Yeah, advice to 30, like to anyone who's 30 or my past 30.
To you. To you.
Um, yeah, just don't stress out so much that everything's going to be okay. Just enjoy the ride.
What might you do to accomplish your 10-year-old goal in the next 6 months if you had a gun against your head?
I think for me, just focus and say no more. That's just a chronic problem that I have, just in my life. I always like to say yes, that I'm always like starting new projects. And if I was really dedicated on like getting the 10-year goal down to 6 months, then I would have to not do much else other than just focus on that.
Idoh, this was a pleasure. Any final thoughts, final messages, that something I maybe didn't ask you in this interview, but you wish I did, or any final messages that you'd love to leave product people with?
Not really. I mean, I think, like talking about product stuff, I mean, we could go on for hours, but I really enjoyed being on this podcast. I think it was really awesome. Thank you so much for setting it up. And yeah, I hope the people who are listening got something interesting out of it.
I enjoyed it too, Idoh. Thank you for coming. This was super candid, very casual, the way that we like it, very much off the record almost style. Product Innovation Show. Thank you guys for listening. We will include all the links in the show notes. You can include your LinkedIn profile, Idoh, so people can go ahead and connect with you directly if they'd like. And we'll be back with the next episode.